Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our fourth program in this series of programs about the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. My name is Kim Strader, and I'm the volunteer coordinator with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. And Loudoun Wildlife was founded in 1995 by four individuals, and we are fortunate enough to have one of them with us this evening, and that's our speaker, Joe Coleman. So the four citizens came together because they were determined to protect wildlife habitat in Loudoun County at a time when there was rapid pressure and development and population growth going on. And since then, since 1995, we've grown into the organization that we are today. And we are a volunteer driven, membership funded nonprofit that focuses on education, conservation advocacy, habitat restoration, citizen science, and we also have an 89-acre property, J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is our fourth program in a series of programs about the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. And the wetlands were created to offset habitat destruction that was happening during the time of the Dulles Greenway, the roadway being built. And the construction began around 1993 and finished up pretty much in 1995. But of course, for the wetlands to become what they are today took several decades. This year does mark the 30th anniversary of the Dulles Greenway Wetlands, as well as Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. And Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy partners with the Dulles Greenway to steward that land, and we also offer occasional bird walks and stuff there. Please note, though, that the Dulles Greenway Wetlands is not open to the public. It is private property, and basically that's why we offer walks there occasionally. So our speaker this evening is Joe Coleman, and as I said, he is one of the founding members of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. He's been coordinating bird walks throughout the county since the inception of the organization. He has also organized and compiled the Central Loudoun Christmas bird count since 1997. So please join me in welcoming Joe Coleman to talk about the birds of the Dulles Wetlands this evening.
Thank you very much, Kim. It's kind of dangerous to ask me to talk about birds. I have a tendency sometimes to get a little bit carried away and talk a little bit long. And especially the Dulles Wetlands, which is a location that I absolutely love. Um, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be able to visit the Dulles Wetlands now for almost 30 years. I'm not sure when I first was able to get permission to go on it, but I do know that as part of the due diligence to establish it and getting it approved as a wetlands, a lot of research was done on it, and birders would occasionally go on it and document what was there. And in the old days, they posted on a birding listserv called Virginia Bird, and we'd pick up that very nice things were being seen there. This is a photo of the wetlands not too far back in the past. You'll notice the very large dead tree on the right-hand side. That tree has now since fallen. There's a whole lot more forest at the wetlands, but it's still a really special place to go to. And and it has changed over the years. This photo was probably taken about 20 years ago, maybe as little as 15. I'm not sure the exact year. But today, if you're in that same location, you're going to see what's basically a heavily forested wetlands with some wet scrub, some meadow habitat, but mostly heavily wooded wetlands, which interestingly enough, was one of the goals of the wetlands engineer that put this together. His name was Kurt Phillip. He was under contract to the Greenway. And, you know, this wooded wetlands are basically the rarest and most valuable type of wetlands they are. And another name for wooded wetlands, by the way, is swamp. They're the most productive you can possibly get. They're often, especially floodplain wooded wetlands, because they help mitigate flooding. they receive a tremendous amount of upstream soil. They're incredibly rich because they were considered no man lands and not productive at all for humankind, or at least people thought they weren't. Um, there was a major move in this country, a pretty successful one, to take out these kinds of wetlands. And this one had completely taken out. It was actually all grassland, cropland up until the work on it began in the early 90s to make it a wetlands again. Um, this is a symbol of what we think of as the Dulles wetlands now. This is the first breeding female with two of her young on the nest. And this photo was taken probably a little less than 20 years ago. But it is a bald eagle. It's one of the wonderful birds that's on the wetlands. This aerial photo, which is from the Loudoun County Archives, by the way, shows the wetlands in 2002. And they'd already been in existence then for quite a few years. But you'll notice if you take a look at it, it's still a lot of grasslands, a lot of meadows, especially over here in this area here. It's just starting to, it's filling up with water, but there isn't still a whole lot growing around it. And one of the ways you create wetlands, well, first, one of the ways you destroy wetlands was to put in drainage tile and have them drain into the closest major waterway. This is Goose Creek, by the way. This is a little trickle ditch that ran down there, and this is also that. And those drainage ditches would go into these and then flow into the stream and end up draining it. The engineer that put this together, Kurt Phillip, one of the first things he did was take a bulldozer out there and crush that drainage tile so it would no longer have the water run out of it. Um, but anyway, those wetlands quickly began to form. One of the first things that comes back to a wetlands after it's been created, um, and one of the first things that shows that it's successful is birds. Not just beautiful birds like these wood ducks, which are, generally don't overwinter here, but a few do, but they do nest. And this is actually a cavity nesting duck, by the way. Um, it lays its eggs in a cavity in a tree, 20, 30 feet off the ground. And when the young are ready, the mother kind of forces them out of the tree to jump down to the ground, which I've actually seen them not jump out of the ground, but seen them right after they did it when they were being walked to a stream, which is really a pretty cool thing. This is a wood duck. This photo was taken at the Dulles Wetlands, where she is actually raising young. And she's probably raising young, by the way, not just from her own family, her own eggs, but also from other eggs that were laid in her nest, which is a common practice with wood ducks in their cavities. Um, this is a duck that shows up in our area in the winter and shows up at the Dulles Wetlands. It doesn't nest here. It's a bufflehead. Really cute small duck. And I think it is either our smallest or next to the smallest duck. This is a northern pintail, which some people would argue is one of the most beautiful ducks out there. Um, it's not uncommon to find these and see these at somebody needs to be muted. I'm sorry. Thank you. But this is a northern pintail, as I was saying, and an absolutely beautiful duck that we do see there sometimes in the wintertime. This is a hooded merganser. This is a duck that we don't only see in our area on small ponds, a little bit larger, small lakes in the wintertime, but it is actually a duck that nests here. The first breeding records for this duck, this is a female with its young at the Dulles Wetlands, and this is the first breeding record of hooded mergansers ever in Loudoun County. And that was found when we were doing the bird atlas that we sponsored from 2009 to 2014. These are less common birds at the wetlands. These are tundra swans, which generally migrate through here, though with our milder winters, they are more commonly overwintering here. They certainly don't stay for the summer. They move back far north. These are ringneck ducks, and really attractive duck that shows up here in the wintertime. It's a diving duck, and until recently, the water at the wetlands generally wasn't deep enough to really do a lot of diving. But in the last few years, as the wetlands has developed, the water has gotten deeper, and one will see ringneck ducks there more often. The other kinds of birds that we find a lot at the wetlands are wading birds. This is a green heron, really beautiful, relatively small heron that nests in woods and builds a really flimsy nest out of sticks and shrub and things like that. Um, and it is definitely found at the Dulles wetlands from late spring into early fall, and is an absolutely beautiful heron. Um, this is the Dulles wetlands. About 20 years ago. It looks very different now. This is heavily forested with the view. In the background is Little Oatlands. And to the Little Oatlands was actually built in 1804, and it's where the family who built Oatlands itself lived while they were building Oatlands. And one of the reasons I mention that is it's a National Historic Trust property. It's owned and preserved for that. And as a result, the Dulles wetlands is only a small green component of a very large green area in this part of the county. As a result, this ends up being an incredibly valuable area for wildlife because of everything around it. And you will also notice that there's a lot of dirt and mud here on the edge of the wetlands. The vegetation is pretty shallow. The pond itself is pretty shallow. As I said, almost all of this is now heavily grown up. So is this, with black willows on this side and black willows on this side, as well as some other stuff coming in. Um, and it's changed its nature. In those days, it wasn't uncommon to see a lot of wading birds as well. And bald eagles hadn't moved in yet. Now, this is a bird that we found for our first time ever. This was on the hill over at Little Oatlands, and we found it when we were visiting the Dulles wetlands last February or March. Chuck Moore actually took this photo of these four sandhill cranes up on the meadow at Little Oatlands. And, these are probably the four birds that actually hang out at the wildlife sanctuary at Algonquian. And generally they fly into Maryland, but occasionally they fly to other parts of the county. And I think this day we were lucky enough that they flew over here and we got a good look at them. These are great blue herons, which are scattered all over the county. This is a bird that when it's feeding is actually pretty comfortable being close to us. They'll come to best management practice ponds and subdivisions. They'll come to almost any type of waterway, but they are very shy when they're nesting. They do not want human beings walking under their nests or too near their nests, and have been known to abandon rookeries. There'll be 40 or 50 of them sometimes nesting in the same area. They've been known, when trails have been put in underneath them, to actually abandon it. As a result, um, most state wildlife departments discourage, if not outright prohibit, the building of trails near where they're nesting areas. But again, that's when they're nesting. A trail could be open when they're not nesting. They generally start messing around with their nests around February, checking them out, repairing sticks, and stay in those nests for the next few months while they raise their young. This is a great egret, another bird, another wading bird that's frequently found in Loudoun County. I don't believe we have any nesting records of this bird in the county, though there are nesting records in both Montgomery County, Maryland, along the river, and Washington County, Maryland, along the river. So I think it's just a matter of time. And they will sometimes actually share a rookery with great blue herons. And I'm hoping that someday we might end up with a nest um, of them and great blue herons at the Dulles wetlands. These are double-crested cormorants. These are generally divers, most frequently found in the Potomac River, Shenandoah River, Beaver Dam Reservoir, because they're divers and they're very effective divers. And until recently, the water wasn't deep enough at the Dulles wetlands um, to welcome them. This is a tricolored heron. This was actually a rare bird. This is actually a rare bird. This photo was taken at the Dulles Wetlands in 2014. Um, and it was documented, accepted by the Virginia Avian Records Committee. It was really exciting, but it was at a time when there was still a lot of mud on the edge of the water at the Dulles Wetlands. And the water was shallower. Um, Now, this is the Dulles Wetlands in 2022, and it's really starting to change here. You can really see this heavy vegetation has grown up all around the water here, and this has gotten even heavier now. This is basically a wooded forest or a swamp at this particular point. And it spreads way back here, moves around like this. Now, on a really dry year like this past year that we had in 2024, there probably wasn't any more water in this. But the year before that and the year before that, which were either normally wet years or a little bit extra water, the water came way over here. Incidentally, the bald eagle nest that we've been watching for years, which unfortunately isn't being used this year, is in approximately this area, just if you're curious. This is a new, unfortunate subdivision, Cortland Farms rural village that went um, in the first decade of the 2000s. And this is its water treatment plant. But all of this is the Dulles wetlands over here. This is all the development and as close as they can actually get to the Dulles wetlands. And by the way, I will emphasize the Dulles wetlands is a private property. And one of the reasons for that is, or the main reason really for that is to protect it. But anyway, this next slide, and actually has a little bit of sound with it, but you're not really going to be able to hear it because it's so quiet. But anyway, this is something that we occasionally hear their gobbling when we're at the wetlands. We had a walk back there at the wetlands about 3 weeks ago when there was snow on the ground on both a Saturday and a Sunday, and there were a tremendous number of wild turkey tracks. But all the times I have been to the Dulles wetlands, there's all kinds of signs of them. But this is a really smart bird. And if you make the least bit of noise, it's a bird that's not going to be seen and it's going to disappear. But I couldn't believe how many tracks there were in that date in early February when we were there. Literally everywhere. Anyway, um, there are also a lot of woods around the wetlands now with some mature trees, especially along Big Branch, which is a tributary stream that runs into Goose Creek immediately downstream from the wetlands and is basically the um, eastern border of the wetlands. This is a yellow-bellied sapsucker, a bird that's here in the winter, a woodpecker that's here in the winter, and it is a sapsucker. It drills holes in the side of the tree and drinks the sap and occasionally and eats the insects that also get attracted to that. Um, the other thing that's fantastic about the wetlands is it's really developed some healthy meadow and shrub habitat. And in the case of the wetlands, much of that is wet, damp, marshy meadow and shrub habitat, and as such is very productive in terms of wildlife. One of the birds that's attracted to that are red-winged blackbirds, which can be found year-round at the wetlands. They get in really large flocks in the wintertime, and they are much less social when they start nesting, but they still basically are a social bird with nests close to each other. Um, this is another bird that is actually not the least bit social when it's nesting, and it's a bluebird. In the wintertime, these will get together in groups of 15, 20. They'll even cram into a cavity on a really cold night or a nest box on a really cold night to stay warm. These are bluebird nestlings. The Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy used to have a nest box trail at the wetlands, and as such, it um, it was a very productive um, place to find bluebirds. But as it grew, as it became more forested, those nest boxes began to be used less and less. Also, as the wooded scrub land got much more extensive and heavy, the tick population grew. And the people that were monitoring that trail got really tired picking ticks off themselves after being on the wetlands. And that is one of the things we warn people about when we do an occasional bird walk there, and it's not in high winter and it's not real cold, is that there's an excellent chance of picking up ticks. Briars also get really heavy at that time and can be a bit of a nuisance as well. There are still bluebirds there, but we're not managing a trail. They're actually using the natural cavities that exist there in the locust trees and in the sycamore trees, which are two wonderful trees for cavity nesting birds. This is another cavity nesting bird, absolutely beautiful nest. It's tree swallows nest, and that was something that that's a bird that frequently uses our bluebird boxes, regardless of where they are, but really use them extensively. I think the majority of the boxes had tree swallows on them at the Dulles Wetlands. Beautiful, beautiful nest, like I'm saying, and a beautiful bird. It's really fun watching it fly over the water, um, picking off insects in flight or hawking insects, as they say. This is another bird that you frequently find in scrubland, grasslands, and that's an indigo bunting. They make a nice little bowl nest in trees. They're frequently found on the edges of the Dulles wetlands and on the neighboring properties like Little Oatlands. Um, this is another bird that likes the nest near water. This is white-eyed vireo. This photo actually wasn't taken at the Dulles wetlands, but was taken in a wetlands area at Sweet Run State Park when it was the Blue Ridge Center for Parkway. You can actually see the nest down here, and this is both a male and a female. Um, White-eyed vireo. They commonly nest at the Dulles wetlands. We hear them very frequently, usually on the edges of the property in the shrubs and the scrubland, but it is very common to find them near and around water. Common yellowthroats love scrub habitat, water habitat, and this is also called the bandit bird for a really obvious reason. Really pretty male common yellowthroat. This is a yellow-breasted chat, another bird that's found on the edges in the scrubland, both at Banshee Reeks, Little Oatlands, um, Dulles Wetlands, and Sweet Run State Park. And this bird literally chats, and once it gets wound up and gets going, that's where it got its name, and it'll chat incessantly for quite a time period. Um, Now, the other things that are really special about the Dulles Wetlands is it gets a lot of milkweed, and this is a monarch caterpillar on the milkweed. This photo wasn't necessarily taken at the wetlands, but it is a common sighting at the wetlands at certain times of the year. And it's one that we're always excited to see because monarchs are a very special butterfly. Um, Barred owls are definitely wetlands, swamp birds, and this is a barred owl. We frequently hear barred owls, rarely see them at the Dulles wetlands. It's not uncommon to hear them. Um, and this is a bird that handles the night shift, I'm sorry, eats a lot of small rodents, it eats frogs, it eats snakes, and so does this bird. This is a red-shouldered hawk, which also likes basically the same kind of habitat as a barred owl and has much of the same diet. Um, it has a tendency to fly more in the daytime, a little bit at dawn and dusk, where the barred owl flies predominantly at night, but also at dawn and dusk. The two birds will often live close together and nest close together. I've seen them um, in Fairfax County actually get together and mob a great horned owl that had come into their area where both of them were nesting. Kind of fascinating watching them do that. Um, the other thing that we get a lot of at the wetlands, and it's really nice when you have someone that knows dragonflies to be with you. There are a lot of them there. A lot of dragonflies lay their eggs in still water, and as a result, it ends up being pretty valuable for them. And they're also a food source for a fair number of birds. Um, the other bird that we find a lot of at the Dulles wetlands, a really healthy population, are swamp sparrows. aptly named and aptly appropriately showing up at the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. And this is on a cattail. Um, this is a prairie warbler, and this is a bird that we often find on hedgerows and on the scrub habitat. Um, and Little Oatlands is that, and along the road that runs separates Little Oatlands from the Dulles Wetlands is a place where it's not uncommon for us to hear as many as three of them singing um, on a spring morning. And it's really a lot of fun to hear them. They also are very common at Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve, which, while it doesn't border the Dulles Greenway Wetlands, is only separated by at most a quarter mile where it's as close as it can be. And the South Wetlands is actually immediately across Goose Creek um, from Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve. Um, the other birds that used to be really common at the Dulles Wetlands, but since the water level's gotten higher, are not nearly as common. A lot of us found our Loudoun County Baird's sandpiper, or other certain shorebirds at the Dulles Wetlands back in the early 2000s. Now with the heavy water, these birds aren't seen as often, but this is a spotted sandpiper which you could still pick up on the edges of the wetlands during migration in the spring and the fall. This is a Wilson snipe. This is a bird that winters over here and hides in wet, muddy habitat in fields, but also in swamps and wetlands. And there's probably still a very healthy population of them at the wetlands, but because there's so little mud for them to be out on, it's not a bird that we would see unless we actually accidentally flushed it while we were moving around. And they would have a tendency to avoid places where people or coyotes would walk on a regular basis. Uh, this is a woodcock. I've actually watched this bird take off from the ground at the Dulles Wetlands on a couple of occasions, fly into the sky, do its wonderful wing whir, its painting call, um, and it's a good possibility that it nests in some of the woods next to and near the Dulles Wetlands. This photo, by the way, this is a bird that really has some issues in migration. It has a tendency to run into high-rise buildings that are built lit up at night. And this photo was actually taken on Capitol Hill in DC um, because these birds really do go to cities a whole lot. And another bird that all of us know, but an incredibly common bird, we see it a lot at the wetlands, we see it a lot throughout Loudoun County, is the northern cardinal. And as some people say, if this bird was less common, we would go gaga every time we found it. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful bird, but it's so common we don't think twice about it. But this is another thing I want to emphasize. Birds are incredibly um, important. They're messengers. They tell us what's going on in the world. And unfortunately, from 1970 to 2020, as a result of extensive scientific studies we found that almost 3 billion birds disappeared in the 50 years from 1970 to 2020. And that is largely because of changing conditions, habitat change, um, loss of habitat. Birds have enormous nest fidelity. They really like to go back to the same place they nested. And you can imagine what happens if somebody builds a subdivision or um, puts in houses, high rises, or whatever where they nested. Um, and there are a lot of things that really have messed them up. Climate change, of course, is a factor, but there are tons of factors. And one of the things that's really fantastic about the wetlands, and don't forget it, is that it's incredibly valuable wildlife habitat. Wooded wetlands, i.e. swamps, are about as valuable and productive a wetlands as you can get. The really deep, nutritious soil that is there is the reason they were cleared, but it's the reason why they produce so much other vegetation and wildlife, and as a result, support them. And it's fantastic that we're now preserving them and building them. Um, And I just want to end this talk today with a few things. Suffering. Some birds where we've gone to the trouble to try to make a difference and make and have done things, they're thriving. Waterfowl are actually thriving. And they're thriving because we are building wetlands throughout the country, but also because duck hunters spend a lot of money every year that gets taxed and goes into supporting waterfowl. And as a result, their numbers are doing very well. Their numbers are actually on the increase. And it does show that we can make a difference. Um, we passed laws banning certain pesticides like DDT, and we also passed laws against shooting and killing raptors, birds of prey. And as a result, their numbers have gone up extensively over the last 50 years. They're up considerably. Another bird that is also hunted and gets a lot of money through hunting fees are wild turkeys. And as a result, their numbers have grown so much that they're actually a nuisance in some places. They're very comfortable around people in a lot of places in New England and actually end up being a nuisance, especially a tom turkey like this, who doesn't appreciate anything getting between him and his females, and it makes a difference. But it's great to know that we can really make a difference. Um, this is a bird whose numbers almost disappeared in the lower 48. If you were on Liz's program about eagles a couple of weeks ago, you would have heard that. In our first Christmas bird counts in the late 90s and the early 2000s, there were years when we never saw a bald eagle. And now, this year, we only had 67 bald eagles, only, where the year before we had more than that. It's incredible to think how much they've come back because of the banning of DDT and because of the laws that prohibited people from being able to shoot at them um, when they wanted to shoot at them. And that's true of a lot of the raptor species. Um, Other birds of prey are having some problems because of loss of habitat, but a lot are doing relatively well. Um, and there are simple actions that all of us can do. There are big actions we can do, like making sure that wetlands are preserved and protected, restored whenever they can, but there are little things that all of us can do. And I'll just, let you kind of take a look at the different things that are listed here. Some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them aren't. I don't think a lot of people realize how windows, millions of birds die every year because they run into windows, especially in well-lit cities that are on their migration routes. And there are actually quite a few cities that have started programs where they turn off their lights during migration. Cats kill millions of birds um, every year. And I love cats. I think they're fantastic, but I firmly believe they should be kept inside. They aren't native to North America. Our birds did not evolve with them and did not learn how to protect themselves from them. And as a result, they become easy prey for cats. Native plants provide a really rich food source for both for insects that the birds end up eating. And almost every bird, even if it's a fructivore, even if it specializes in eating nuts, seeds, and things like that, they often eat a whole lot of insects and bring them to their young when their young are being raised. Fledglings and nestlings need a lot of protein. And then there are other things here, like avoiding pesticides and so on. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of do that and mention that. I also want to thank the people who were fortunate enough to loan me their photographs, and almost each one of these individuals has at least one photograph, if not more, in this particular slideshow that I just did. So thank you very much. And at this particular point, I'm available to answer any questions any of you all might have. And I hope I didn't run through that too quickly. But anyway, if you have any questions, just let us know. Kim?
I have a question, Joe. Do we see many kingfishers there?
Yes, kingfishers are very common. They're during the right time of year, we hear them a lot as they fly around there. Kingfishers actually nest in cavities on the side of a stream, um, and which means they're probably nesting in cavities, holes up on the bank along Goose Creek, and we've actually found some of those holes in the past, and we do frequently hear them and frequently see them when we're at the wetlands at the right time of year. They're here all the time, all year long, but obviously they're not going to be hunting the wetlands when it's frozen. Um, but they will grab the small minnows and things that are in there, eat them themselves, or take them to their young when they have young.
Thank you. Oh, and one other. Do we have wood thrushes there?
We have wood thrushes in the woods around there. We also, in the wintertime, get a fair number of hermit thrushes in the forested areas there. Um, the wooded wetlands, we actually don't go on. The water there is now 2 or 3 feet deep, where we used to see a whole lot of ducks. Those ducks now disappear back into those wooded wetlands. But where we can walk and where we can move around, we'll hear wood thrushes singing during the summer months, and we'll see on occasion hermit thrushes in the wintertime, or we'll hear them making their alarm call when we're walking too close to them. Any other
And
questions, anybody?
yes, Susan has a question. She says, in the introductory program last month, Joe mentioned beaver at the wetlands. Are there beaver?
There
And were
are
they
there are definitely
introduced?
beavers at the wetlands. It's very common. I actually um, have a couple photos, but none of them are good, so I didn't include them in this show. One, they're not birds, but I was still going to include them. Um, Beavers have built a fantastically large hutch in the middle of the wetlands. Used to be a tree right next to it. Unfortunately, that tree has fallen, died and fell, but they do have a healthy population there. Um, and it is not uncommon to see beavers there if you're there very early in the morning or at dusk. Um, and they'll be moving around and you'll be watching them. There are also river otters there, and beavers need to be careful when there are river otters around. River otter won't take an adult beaver, but a river otter will actually take, they're really pretty high up the food chain. They will take baby beavers, so the parents have to be careful of them when the river otters are moving around.
Thank you, Joe. And we have several people saying, thank you so much. Wonderful. When is your next bird walk?
Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy does bird walks almost every weekend. We're actually doing one this Saturday at Gilbert's Corner, which is a relatively new Northern Virginia Regional Park property. We're also doing a young birders walk there the same day for 13 to 19-year-olds. That's this Saturday. Um, we're doing a couple woodcock walks in the near future, but I think both of those filled up almost as soon as they were advertised. Um, we do a walk at Banshee Reeks every second Saturday of the month at 8 a.m. Um, we do ask people to register, but we don't limit attendance at that. We ask people to register so we can pull in extra leaders if more than a dozen people or so sign up. And we do another regular walk at Algonquian Regional Park on the third Sunday of every month. And on the fourth Saturday of every month, we do a regular walk at Sweet Run State Park. Um, and I don't have a list of the attendees on this program, but I know that a lot of the people that had signed up for this program were were people that regularly came on our bird walks. And if you are part of this, thank you for joining us. And come on out. We also do a whole lot of very special walks starting in mid-April through mid-May, where we'll walk at a lot of special places that we don't normally go to. Um, and hopefully we'll have one at Willows Ford. We'll have one at Goodstone, hopefully. Um, and a series of walks at Sweet Run, some places in eastern Loudoun. We're going to be doing a big sit at Algonquian, which is basically an all-day event. And that's from mid-April to mid-May, which is the height of bird migration in this area and is a very special time for birders. It's also the height of spring, so it's a really lot of fun to get outside. We also do a birdathon during that time period, and teams of 3 and 4 people, up to 6 people, get together, go out and count as many birds as they can in either a 24 or a 48-hour time period, or a portion of that, and they raise money for Loudoun Wildlife. It's similar to a walkathon, except it's a birdathon, and it's a whole lot of fun. And I know that each of the teams loves to get supported by people and find as many exciting birds as they can. And if you like to count birds, I highly recommend doing it. It's a lot of fun.
And
I think
I'll
I answered that question with way too long an answer, but anyway.
That's okay. You included a lot of stuff. And what we'll do is in the follow-up email, we'll be sure and include a link to our events calendar, but then also to the birdathon information that Joe was just speaking about.
Another place we do walks, by the way, which has been very productive, is Broad Run Stream Valley Park. We do a walk there once a quarter. And we do, one of our woodcock walks is going to be there in this coming month, but then we have a walk there in April as well. And Broad Run Stream Valley Park is over towards the southeastern part of the county, and it's an incredibly productive stream valley, which unfortunately they're going to put some really major power pylons in to bring power to um, all of the servers that we have in the eastern part of the county, but hopefully they'll end up protecting a lot of the habitat there while they do that.
Does anyone have any other questions for Joe this evening? Or for us with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy? No? Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Joe, for speaking this evening and telling us about all of the birds that you've encountered out at the wetlands. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.